Hello and welcome to Moving Kentucky Forward. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and this week I'm very excited to say that we have Robert Kahne as our guest. Robert is one of the best analysts when it comes to election results, and I'm excited to see what he has to share with us today. Let's hear from Robert. So we're here today with Robert Kahne. Robert is not only the co-host with Jasmine Smith of our sister show, My Old Kentucky Podcast, which is the best political podcast in the state of Kentucky, but he is also an election results guru and analyst. And I am excited to have him here to talk to us about everything that happened on Tuesday. Welcome, Robert, to Moving Kentucky Forward.
Appreciate that, Bruce. You've been saying that about our show for a long time. And I think that the fact that you still think that after there are now like several, there's like 4 or 5 that you still think that. So, you might switch to saying like the oldest at some point. So
no, I think it says something that I even put your show over mine. So there you go. So we've got lots we can talk about, but let's begin by, let me ask you, what is your top line reaction to the results in Kentucky?
Okay. Well, I think my reaction to Kentucky is a little bit tied up in how I feel about the results as a whole in the whole country, which is basically that it was the same election as 2020 across the whole country, which is generally good for Democrats because typically in the first midterm after a new president is elected, you get beat by a lot. It's just that in Kentucky, we had redistricting. And because we had redistricting, we had some losses in the state house. I think the 5 seats that were lost, which was the whole kind of the whole kind of ball game for 2022, were entirely due to redistricting. And absent that, we would have basically had the same election that we had in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Let me follow up. Top line reaction to the national results then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's shocking how well Democrats did. I think the fundamentals of American politics this century and going back even further to like the 15, 20 years before that are basically whatever president gets elected, they typically their party is in for a beatdown in the next midterm election. And there has to be some sort of something that happens to stop that from going on. And the last time we saw something actually happen was 2001, which was, of course, 9/11. So the 2002 midterm was pretty good for Republicans. And this time, unfortunately, it was a terrible thing that happened in terms of, American liberty and just policy wise, which is the Dobbs versus Jackson decision, which revoked Roe v. Wade and, eliminated the right to an abortion for many, many people. And that caused a big change. And I just think, President Biden was able to realize that he wasn't doing well and made a bunch of changes and did a bunch of things differently that caused Democrats to look a lot better. And now, there's still a lot to be determined, and control of both chambers is kind of up for grabs right now, which I think is pretty wild given, what normally happens around this time.
So let's talk first about Kentucky. I told numerous people that it appeared obvious to me that the redistricting was to get rid of Democratic women. That's who they went after, and it looked to me like, for the most part, they succeeded. What do you think about that statement?
I think they took care of a lot of the Democratic women just in basically the redistricting process itself. By that, I mean, there were, I think, 3 women that were eliminated from the legislature just because they drew multiple women into the same district. And
right.
Of course, Representative Cantrell and Representative Marzian had to, decided not to run for election to the state house this cycle because of the way that the maps were drawn. In the actual election, the 5 seats that were lost, I think 3 of them were men. It was Representative Donahue, Representative Miller, and Representative Wheatley. And then the 2 others that were lost were Representative Minter and Representative Hatton. I think that they were definitely targeting a few more women. They were targeting Representative Stevenson, Sherilyn Stevenson, not Pamela Stevenson, but they were certainly targeting her. I think that race to me was on the state house level the highlight of the night for me, because I believe that she was the person most closely targeted. I don't want to take credit for this joke, but I did see my friend Tony called her new district the Lexington Lobster Claw, because it kind of turned from this very nice, compact, succinct South Lexington district into this crazy sea-looking thing that's scooped up into Scott County. And she was able to pull off a victory there by 35 votes by running a really hard race and doing a really good job. I think this is her second election that has been in the double digits, so that's not something that she's unused to. So but yeah, but to your question, I do think that there were certainly targets on Democratic women's backs for sure this cycle.
I talked to one of the people in the Mentor campaign, and this person told me that the redistricting for Patty Mentor's area, Patty lives on a corner in Bowling Green, and the district line literally went around her corner.
Yeah,
they drew around her house to get her in another district.
The exact same thing happened to Representative Raymond and Representative Marzian that's an easy district for Democrats. It wasn't like they were trying to beat them, but they drew Representative Raymond's house basically into that district so that there would be 2 Democratic women into it. Like it is. Right. That is not much territory at all that Representative Raymond had previous to this election. And yeah, that's certainly what they did with Representative Minter. She only had about half of her old district. Her old district, I think. So one of the ways I took a look at this was I looked at the U.S. Senate results. Charles Booker got around he got like 38% of the vote statewide. And I looked to say, like, based on the precincts that were there in 2020, based on the precincts that were in the districts in 2020, what would it have looked like? And 4 out of the 5 districts, Representative Booker won in those seats. And the thing is, like, the 5th one was Representative Miller's district, and Representative Miller has been able to win his race despite the fact that Democrats on the presidential and Senate level have lost a lot. So he's well known in the PRP area. I think that PRP area, Pleasure Ridge Park, for anybody that's outside of Louisville, I think that his district was included a lot of non-PRP area, which was not the case before. And that's just kind of one of the things we go back to in this race, is these communities of interest have been broken up. Every small, and I usually talk about that in terms of like the small cities. Covington was split into like 3 or 4 districts. Paducah was split into 3 districts. Ashland was split into 2 districts. Richmond was split into 2. Every city was split multiple ways. But even inside of Louisville, you have places like PRP, like Shively, a lot of these kind of smaller cities, smaller communities of interest are still like cracked into different ways just to make way for more Republican districts within Louisville.
Yeah. I was pleased to see that a couple of other Democrats that I worried about actually were able to pull it off. Karen Berg, for one. Sherilyn Stevenson, like you mentioned, which I was very pleased to see. I was disappointed that Buddy Wheatley couldn't pull his off. And I got really worried early in the evening because Rachel Roberts was behind by a good chunk of votes and then wound up winning fairly easily.
Yeah. There's Democrats in this state, and if you're gonna draw crazy maps, you kind of have to put the Democrats in some places. And Karen Berg's district actually got significantly easier for her to win. It used to include all of Oldham County. That district is now all within Jefferson County. Now, it includes some conservative areas, but she actually was much more likely to win this than she would have if it had included more of Oldham County. But, she did have a strong challenger. James Peden is on the Metro Council, has been for a long time, well known in that district. So I was, I wasn't not worried about her. That is definitely true. But I was happy to see that she won. Representative Roberts, to me, always seemed quite a bit safer than Representative Wheatley, and was able to win that district, despite the fact that it did get worse for her. I looked at Representative Wheatley's district. I said that every one of these seats that were lost, besides one, were won by Representative Booker. Representative Booker won the old district that Buddy Wheatley ran in 60-40.
Wow.
60-40. And Charles Booker actually lost the new district 65, I think it's 65, by about 8 points. Buddy Wheatley only lost by a couple of hundred votes. It was, I think, just 2 or 3 percentage points. So he ran ahead of Representative Booker in that district. But just, the handicap was too strong for him, which is a real shame because he's a strong advocate for the folks of Covington. I was talking to some folks in Covington today. This is the first time that they say in the history of the state of Kentucky that there's no one from Covington in the state legislature.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all depressing. What did you think of the Booker race and how that turned out?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to think about this. I think that there's some kind of depressing ways to think about it in terms of it does seem like no matter what happens, there's kind of a ceiling on Democrats' chances in Kentucky these days. At about 40%, and both Representative Booker and Amy McGrath, who ran before, hit about the same percentage points. They did it in very different ways. Charles Booker was able to forge a really deep connection with a lot of people across the state, and was able, with about $7 million, to do a little. Do about as well as as Amy McGrath. Now, the thing is, Amy McGrath was able to raise all that money because she's good at doing that. And she was able to deploy this army of organizers out into the state. And I think both of those things are valuable in terms of increasing Democrats' chances over the long term. We do probably have a hard ceiling. It's going to be very difficult for us to elect U.S. senators as Democrats. But the thing is, it's really good that we keep trying. I really think there are states across this country where the Democrats who run for Senate are not well funded, are not well supported, there are people that were complaining that Charles Booker didn't have good support. He did raise, close to $6 million, which, if you're talking 15 to 20 years ago, that's like a ton of money. That's a lot of money to run a Senate campaign. These days, it's really not. But being able to spend that money to organize the state is still pretty valuable. I think Charles Booker was a good avatar of a Democratic message that was meaningful to the people across the state of Kentucky. His from the hood to the holler kind of idea. I think that really activated a lot of people. It gets people thinking about these types of things. And, maybe Representative Ashley Tackett Lafferty doesn't survive if Charles Booker doesn't run the race that he does. Maybe Patty Minter gets beat by 10 instead of by 2. There's a lot of advantages to having a Senate campaign that's well run in the state, even if it doesn't necessarily result in a victory. There's lots of things that I could say about things that I wish had happened for Charles Booker that didn't quite happen, but it's over now. I'm really glad to have had him as the nominee. I am glad that Amy McGrath was the nominee before him. I think it's really great that in this state that hasn't elected a Democratic senator since the 1990s, we still have good candidates willing to put themselves forward to carry the Democratic flag to try to be elected senator in the state.
So let me ask you this. I want to, there's a whole bunch more stuff I want to get to, but before we leave the Booker and campaign and the legislative races, are there things that you thought KDP should have done or should not have done or something related to any of these races?
Well, now that it's kind of over, it's easy to see, well, this race was close, so they probably should have put more money here instead of there. I know that they spent heavily to try to defeat the lawsuit or to defeat the maps, to overturn the maps that are in place here. I think really after seeing the way that this race came out and the way that these maps kind of function, that really just kind of, validates that strategy in my mind. We need to spend some money to try to take on these maps because it's very difficult, even in a neutral political environment, to maintain 25 seats in it just because of the surgical precision at which they've targeted these things. And the KDP is going to have to spend money to do this. They actually just lost at the circuit court level in front of Judge Wingate. There is some reporting today that says, Judge Wingate isn't going to write a novel lawsuit. He's not going to overturn precedent as a district judge. That's just not really his attitude towards it. But inside of the ruling, and I haven't read this, this is just based on reporting that I've read, he kind of lays out the ways in which the Supreme Court could overturn the map based on the fact that they do that. That's kind of their role. Mm-hmm. So maybe, and that's valuable. That's something the KDP is engaged in. That's valuable. One of the things I have been told is that, in the past, the KDP has spent very heavily on legislative races that weren't close in the end. There are, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was some sort of millions of dollars, multiple millions of dollars spent on races in the past 2 or 3 cycles that the candidates ended up losing by 10 or more points. So not even able to keep it close. And at what point is that just kind of throwing good money after bad? I don't want to say that it's bad for people to run there. They have no hope or they have no chance, but just where are you going to spend your money when it is a bit of a finite resource? Of course, I wish the KDP had the type of money to fully support everybody with tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's just not the party that we live in. The KDP is very fortunate because unlike a lot of our partner states that are similarly situated to us, that have, less than a quarter of the members of the legislature, most of those state parties are deep in debt. They don't have leadership. They don't have staff. They aren't able to keep people on the executive board. If you look around to the states to our south, that's the state that a lot of these state parties are in. The KDP is well funded, has former governors that are still willing to step up and fundraise for us. We actually have a good amount of cash that we have to spend on things where we're actually having this argument about where should we spend our money instead of how do we get out of the debt that we're in. So, I think that the leadership of the KDP, if I was in the leadership of the KDP, would I have done things a little different? Probably. I probably would have spent more on some of these races. I know that they did support a lot of these races, even some of the challengers late in the race. I probably would have started that a little earlier, but I'm not. But at the same time, I can't really criticize because I think that the decisions they made were justified, even if they weren't the ones that I would have made.
Okay, so what about good news in Kentucky?
Well, the 2 constitutional amendments that the Republicans put forth in the legislature both went down, which is huge news. I think that's the best statewide news for Democrats or liberals in Kentucky, really, since Andy Beshear was elected governor. The first constitutional amendment was probably more consequential than the second, even though the second got the most news and was more important to me personally. The first constitutional amendment would have given, of course, the legislature the ability to call itself back into session, which is a very bad idea. And it actually went down by about 8 points. The second constitutional amendment would have banned abortion in the state constitution, which would have basically put an end to basically any chance to legalize abortion or liberalize abortion laws in Kentucky for the foreseeable future. And it went down by 4 points. That I think, if you're looking back, and Bruce, I know you and I both pay very close attention to the General Assembly. When that passed the General Assembly and was put on the ballot, I think both of us were probably like, well, that's going to pass with 70% of the vote. And we could not have been more wrong. I mean, this was an issue that really caught fire nationally. I think there were 6 places it was on the ballot, with places as diverse as Montana, Kentucky. I think, Kansas was a little earlier in the year. I think California had it. A lot of different types of states had it, and they all went down. Every one of them across the whole country, which just goes to show you the status quo and what our thoughts are about what people think about abortion are probably too heavily influenced by what the loudest people say, and that actual people have different opinions about this issue that follow a pretty wide range. Mostly supportive, though.
I've got to tell you 2 quick stories. As you know, at the end of the night, when you're working a poll area, you print out the tape with all the results. And one of the jobs of the role I had is to actually take the tape and put it up on the door outside, right, so people can come look at it. we had 4 precincts in our polling location, so I had 4 different sets of tape. And this was a relatively conservative area. As an example, Deeriff won all 4 precincts for Metro Mayor. And the 2 constitutional amendments got clobbered in all 4 precincts. I mean, it wasn't even close. And the other thing that was interesting was I had gone outside to check on something and was holding the door open for a woman. And she sort of looked teary-eyed to me. I mean, she seemed sort of emotional. And she said, as she passed me, she said, "I've got to go vote, even though it goes against my religion." And I thought, there's a Catholic going to go vote no on the amendment.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, the way that Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 worked in Kentucky probably are, I think, in a lot of ways, the ways that Democrats hope that 2021 goes. No on 2, which is the pro-choice people, the people who support abortion rights, voted no on 2. That won all but 9 precincts in Jefferson County. So, I mean, the Metro Mayor race was a 6-point win for Craig Greenberg, and we can talk about that race if you want to. I'd love to talk about that race. Another piece of good news for Kentucky, in my opinion. But he did not win all but 9 precincts. He lost a lot of precincts. It won all but 9 precincts. It cleared like 110,000 total votes, which erases 70, 80 smaller counties. The smaller counties still only won by 15, 20 points, which is not what happened in the U.S. Senate race, for example. It won, I think, like 30 counties, basically everywhere along I-64 between Louisville and really all the way up to almost Ashland. It did very well, and along 71. It did quite well along 65. Basically, where the interstates are, that's the places where the amendments did quite well. And it just blew out of the water in Louisville and Lexington, which...
Well, nice segue, because I have the map. So
who made that map, Bruce?
This is I believe this is the New York Times map.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the darker the red, the more no votes, and the darker the blue, the more yes votes. And this was before some of these counties actually got counted. Woodford County, for instance, isn't counted in this map. I have to ask your reaction to something that somebody said. Somebody saw this map and said, Kentucky Democrats, here is your plan for 2024.
2024, 2023.
Yeah, they were saying this is what you need to work on to win in 2024. Use this map as your guide.
Well, I don't know what we're supposed to do in 2024.
Well, the midterms and
that's the next presidential election. I don't think we stand much of a chance to carry that. Okay, hold on. Let me show you. Can I show you?
Well, this was okay for 2023. Would you use this?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you're Andy Beshear and you're looking at this, you're looking at this as like, this is the way that I win. What I'm looking at here, and I've got the precinct level information on my screen.
Okay, let me stop sharing and you can throw that up.
Yeah. Let's see here. Is it this one? I think. Well, can you see that?
Yes, now I can.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, you can see Louisville just a total domination. If you're listening and not watching on YouTube or however the video is shared, sorry for this, but you can just see it travel along 64. Franklin County, huge wins. Did really well in Lexington. And you can see these pockets of cities throughout this state. This is Henderson, did really well in Henderson County. Owensboro did quite well in Owensboro. Paducah did very well in Paducah, but not in McCracken County, because you can see the rest of McCracken County is extremely yes onto. Bowling Green, it did very well in basically all of Warren County. It did quite well all the way out, Georgetown, Richmond. This is E-Town. No, E-Town's over here. What is this? I don't know. Nicholas? No, I don't know. I don't know what that is. But it did quite well in every small city across the state. Covington, Northern Kentucky, absolute domination for no on 2. And you can see, yeah, this is absolutely the plan that Andy Beshear and other Democrats could probably take on and a good chance for them to declare victory in 2023. Let me move over. Let me see if I can pull this next one up. This, Bruce, is Amendment 1, and you can see it's quite a bit different. Now, it won by 8 points, which is a lot more than Amendment 2. But one of the things is that it is much more spread out in the way that it won. And in Eastern Kentucky, people were willing to vote yes or vote no on 1, which is, the more liberal position. They were willing to vote no on 1, but not on 2, right. Which I think that's probably culturally telling. That is probably the place where, ideology, anti-abortion sentiment is the most strong in the state, but also there's deep Democratic roots in places like Pikeville and Letcher County and Floyd County. I think that this, more than anything, is kind of Andy Beshear's path, where he really probably will do quite well in Eastern Kentucky. I think, the Beshear name has always been very good down in that part of the state. And I think that this is an 8-point victory. Now, there were 100,000 fewer votes on Amendment 1 versus Amendment 2. And as somebody that was handing out ballots all day, that's probably not surprising to you, because Amendment 1 was 500 words or something of legalese nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that probably about 100,000 people saw it and said, I don't know what this means. I'm not going to vote on it, which that's appropriate. If you don't know what it says, you probably shouldn't vote on it. But you can see here how a lot of the, it really did kind of matter, the Amendment 1 versus 2, and they were quite a bit different, even if the numbers were somewhat comparable. Just for last comparison, this is the U.S. Senate race. And this is, Bruce, if you're saying like this is a Democrats' path forward, that's the difference to me. This is the same election. This is an abortion amendment. There's nothing much more democratic than support for abortion rights. It won by 4 points. Charles Booker, a Democrat, lost by 40. I think the issue that we face is that the brand of the Democratic Party has a lot of issues in the state of Kentucky and a lot of states like Kentucky. I don't think it is our message. I don't think it's what we believe in. I don't think it's our issues. I think people in most of the state, people across the state, even in places like Louisville and Lexington, even people that agree with us on issues, they see the blue, they see the D, all they see are Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and not who those people are really either, just the caricatures of those people as they're told on Fox News or whatever else. That's what they see. And that's what Democrats really face, is how can we rebuild the brand power of the Democratic Party? Because people agree with us. That's what I come away with, is how do we deal with that issue? And that's it.
And of course, the next thing would be, well, Robert, how do you think we should deal with it?
That's just a really, really good question. I will say that, in a lot of the conversations that I've had with Republicans and conservatives across this state, I think the impressions that Democrats have of Republicans are just as bad as the ones that Republicans have of Democrats. Democrats see a Republican and think, Donald Trump or George W. Bush, pick whichever one you feel like is worse. And the reasons why Republicans vote for Republicans is not because they, as voters, don't believe in democracy or, hate women or, want to support insurrectionists. I think that the reasons for voting Republican have to do with anxiety around public safety, have to do with support for gun rights, have to do with, attitudes towards work or whatever. And those are the places where we have these strong disagreements. And that's not really what we're talking about these days. And I think that, having conversations around those things requires a lot of nuance. It requires a lot of trust to get people to open up on those kinds of things, and getting people to kind of like both understand the Democratic positions on them and then also to see what we would rather the government focus on, which is kind of support for people as they're trying to, as they're trying to establish themselves in our economy, stronger supports for families, stronger supports for children, better schools, better access to places like daycares, better access to pre-K, like those types of things, like getting people to focus on those issues. That's, I think, what wins more people over to the Democratic Party. And I certainly hope that that's something that we're going to be able to do, in the near future, in Kentucky as well as nationally.
Let's take down the map so we can see your face more. Cool. Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's a whole nother podcast for another day on what we need to do as Democrats in Kentucky. Let's quickly go to national look and feel, or look and see. How do you feel about the national results? Let me put it this way. Were you surprised?
I guess this was what I had hoped for. Am I surprised? I think that there was a range of things that I was expecting. And I guess I always tend to think more optimistically than really happens. And this was like my optimistic thought was, maybe John Fetterman will win in Pennsylvania. I had high hopes for Tim Ryan in Ohio. But that one I always felt was a little bit more of a stretch. I do think, the North Carolina candidate, oh goodness, I can't think of her name. I can see a picture of her. Sherry Beasley, I think her name.
I think that's right.
I didn't think that she had much of a chance, but I thought, maybe on the best day, and of course that wouldn't know about as well as I'd hoped. I thought that we had a chance in Wisconsin, but it ended up being about what I thought, a few percentage points for Ron Johnson there. But I knew that Nevada was going to be tough to hold. I knew Arizona was going to be tough to hold, but I expected Senator Kelly to hold on there. And I knew that Raphael Warnock was probably going to be the 50th senator. I felt like, all of that could have fallen apart. And it does look like both Senator Kelly, Senator Cortez Masto, and Senator Warnock are all well positioned going into today. I think the one that Senator Warnock is definitely going to a runoff. And we're waiting to see whether that will be for the 50th or the 51st seat for Democrats, which is great news. Democrats have an incredibly good chance to hold the United States Senate, which just seems wild in a period where they had just 50 seats before. In terms of the House, it's even better than I think we had hoped for. The Democrats have a legitimate chance to actually hold on to the House. And we're looking at, if the Republicans take control, like at maximum, they may have like a 15-seat majority, which is really hard to put together. And really, more realistically, you're talking about like 5 or 6 seats or fewer for a Republican speaker. That caucus is wily. It is broad. It is people who are mad about all kinds of things. There's already people that don't like the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, on both the right and the middle of the Republican caucus. And being able to get enough people to support him for speaker is going to be really hard for him. And we may see multiple ballots for speaker. That may be the first time, our new member of Congress, Morgan McGarvey, here in the 3rd District in Kentucky, I was like, why would you want to go to Congress? I kind of thought about that. I know that he doesn't want to be in this Kentucky Senate anymore. That's the worst job in the world, I think. But he took the jump to Congress, and I was like, I don't know what you do up there. You just basically vote however your party tells you, and you don't get to even speak that much anymore. Right. He's going to be in the middle of some real crazy stuff. Like, it's going to be a pretty wild time in the U.S. Congress this next Congress. So get ready. I think no matter what happens, it will be wild. If Democrats hold on, I think that party unity is actually probably stronger in the Democratic Party. If you get down to like 2 or 3 seats for a Republican majority, you could see some defections. There are still 1, maybe 2 pro-Trump or anti-insurrectionists, pro-impeachment Republicans. Hey, come on over here. Give it. And you can be speaker, right? If it's like a 1-seat majority for the Republicans, like go to that one guy and be like, if you want to be the speaker of the House, we'll give you that job. Like, that could be something that happens. I think it's going to be a wild time for legislating. Regardless, it looks a lot better for Democrats in the House than we had thought before. So And I mentioned Tim Ryan before. I think that there's like 3 Ohio House seats that probably flipped to Democrats that wouldn't have been there if not for him. Michigan had a great day on election day for Democrats. There are a lot of places across the country that did really well for Democrats. And weirdly, New York is probably what's going to cost the Democrats a majority. Yes. Which is just kind of weird to think about. A lot of weird stuff going on in New York in the past few years, though. So they got to get their house in order as kind of the leaders of the party. So,
yeah, that's a number of people have said that the Democratic Party in New York is a train wreck, and they're having internal fighting, and that's one reason that some of those things lost. We don't have time to get into it today. It would be an interesting discussion for another time. But I'm starting to look around the country at the number of states that now have a Democratic trifecta, which is new. That's like, really? So, that pendulum is swinging back the other way.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a much better night than we thought. Going forward, let's look at if the Democrats hold it all. That's great. If they lose the House, we've got Jamie Comer being chair of the House Oversight Committee, and we've got Jim Jordan being head of the Judiciary Committee. So let's not wrap up, but let's talk quickly about what are the worst things that we see could happen if the Republicans take the House.
Oh, I mean, I think you just named him. I mean, Kevin McCarthy as Speaker, if he is able to hold on to his caucus, like he's not a safe person to be around. I don't think I just don't. That's kind of dangerous. The way that his kind of approach to Trump, kind of his, I don't know, his kind of like blasé attitude towards like the entire Democratic project of America. Mm-hmm. Like that's kind of scary. And yes, absolutely. Like Jim Jordan. I mean, the fact that like the man has the past that he has with the allegations that haven't really ever been fully investigated around his wrestling team and the sexual abuse that went there, being given like a major position in American democracy is really a travesty. I mean, Jamie Comer's deeply annoying as a person, but the Republican chair of the Oversight Committee always is. Who is the guy? Trey Gowdy. You remember him? He's not there anymore. Whoever whoever holds that position is just a villain no matter what. And James Comer, what a disappointment, right? When he ran for governor, it was kind of thinking like, well, maybe he wouldn't be so bad. He did a good job as agriculture commissioner, kind of, I guess. And he lost that primary to Matt Bevin, went into Congress and just immediately became like the worst version of, a Trumpist Republican, just saying like just awful things in general. And it's just deeply disappointing as somebody, a Republican who I did have a lot of respect for before. So that would be bad for sure. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene getting her committee assignments back, that's a Kevin McCarthy thing. But, the thing about Republicans across this country that I think like sane or like normal Republicans have to cope with is like, in order for them to maintain their majority, they have to make community with anti-democratic people. They have to maintain a community with people who believe that the January 6th insurrection wasn't a big deal, that think that those people are being prosecuted. There's no way for them to maintain their power while going against that thought. And the fact that exists, and that's the situation we find ourselves in as a country, makes it a very dangerous proposition for Republicans to be in charge. And that's the thing that I think is the scariest, especially in Washington, D.C.
I would agree. And I was hopeful that we would hold at least one of the chambers so we could at least stop that from being as bad as it could be.
We do still have the presidency. Luckily we got
at least for 2 more years.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
All right. Robert Kahne, the co-host of My Old Kentucky podcast and a good friend and an absolute guru when it comes to doing analysis of election results. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work you do. And we will probably be having you back on again sometime in the next year to talk about that map and Andy
We
Bashir is going to go with that map.
we got a lot to talk about in terms of Louisville. We didn't really get to. I mean, school board, mayor, Metro Council. There's a lot of stuff there too. Maybe we'll come on and we'll do one about Louisville because there is a lot of cool stuff there. But yeah, I appreciate it, Bruce. Thank you so much for inviting me on. You know, I love to talk about this stuff. So anytime you want to do it.
All right. That was a great interview with Robert Kahne about all the various things about the election and the results and the analysis and so on and so forth. I really want to thank Robert for taking the time to be on the show. And in fact, in his comments at the end, we've already decided to do another show in the next couple of weeks talking about the judicial races and about Louisville and Lexington specifically. Thank you for watching or listening. You can always catch the latest versions of these shows on our website, forwardky.com. We have Moving Kentucky Forward, which is an interview show, which is available via podcast and video on YouTube. And we have The State of Kentucky, which are editorials by me, also available as a podcast and on YouTube. Again, check out forwardky.com. And thank you for being with us.